Growing up in Manitoba on one of the more violent First Nation reservations certainly created an interesting cast of traits. Curiosity, I had to lean in. Tenacity, I turned and faced my challenges. And audacity, I dared to dare. It was my father who modeled audacity, like the time he had a strong desire to homeschool us, sure, for better education, but more urgently, to protect us from the intense bullying that was happening every single day. Fueled by his desires, he was able to face many hurdles, the last of which was to present his case to the regional school board. Now, near the end of his presentation, the chairman interrupted and said, "Mr. Desilets, why, oh why must you always go against the grain?" And without missing a beat, my father replied, "It's not my fault, Mr. Chairman, that the grain happens to be growing in the wrong direction." The important part of this story happened immediately after my father won his case, when the head psychologist caught up with him and said, "Mr. Desilets, if more people could do what you did in there today, we would see a drastic drop in teen suicide. All parents want their kids to thrive and feel safe. But what they fail to recognize is they need to act on that desire, like my father did. When desire calls and we listen and have the audacity to act upon it, we set precedents. Let's talk about desire. It's an evocative, at times quite provocative force. And for thousands of years, we have made our desire the source of our suffering, all the while attempting to ignore its potent siren's call. It doesn't work very well. Let me tell you, desire, if we ignore it, it hurts. So, I started to study desire, and I couldn't make sense of how something so prevalent, so influential, could possibly be a design error. In fact, I started to think about desire as a living force of nature, as though it was acting like the visceral voice of our own essence, our raison d'être, and guiding us every step of the way. And like all forces of nature, desire touches us all equally, no matter our age, ethnicity, gender, or social status. So what then is the actual problem with desire? I found part of the answer in a friend's journey to Bhutan. Until the 1970s, Bhutan kept its borders closed to protect its culture. This is why Bhutanese Buddhism is considered to be very pure. And as a tourist, you're assigned a cultural guide. And this is exactly how my friend was able to have the most extraordinary conversation about desire. He asked his guide, "In the West, we understand that Buddha associated all of the suffering with desire. But when I think of a world free of desire, it seems to me that no one would ever do anything. So what did the Buddha really mean?" And his guide answered him simply, "The Buddha wasn't speaking of desire. He was speaking of grasping desires." I sense that this idea of grasping desires is very similar to what I call a hijacked desire. This is when we're propelled to go for something that we're actually entrained to want, versus taking the time to find out what matters and going for that. A hijacked desire has been crafted and shaped by the expectations, ideals, and mandates of our family, community, and society. We are all taught what and whom to desire. Have you ever written a list, for the perfect partner that you're going to spend forever with? I married my list. And I had the perfect partner. He had the perfect income, but he didn't love me. And forever, I found out, was 30 days. And as my marriage ended, and I came face to face with the death of my own fairy tale, I lost most of my passion for life. Perhaps had I known my true desire, which was to be met deeply in love, I could have lessened the suffering that came from pursuing a desire that had been hijacked by the ideals I grew up in. But hijacked desires are only half of our problem. What happens when we know our true desire and perpetually ignore it? I was aware of my life's calling at a very young age due to an intense trauma that nearly cost me my life. And on the other side of that, I was filled with a desire to help people feel at home in their body, in their sensuality and sexuality. And yet, rather than following that obvious calling, I got a job cleaning gourmet birdseed in a warehouse with no windows and mountains of dust. I went crazy. So I did the next logical thing. I got another job. This time I was dodging golf balls while raking sand pits. And the cost of my intentional avoidance, I found out the day I was laid off. I had my very first panic attack. If you've never had one, it's brutal. It literally feels like you're dying. And for the next 6 months, they increased in number and intensity until the last one had me on my knees, saying to the universe, fine, I will do my life's work, but you've got to take care of me. And the very next day, I was offered what I considered to be my dream job. Panic attacks, they never returned. So when we pursue hijacked desires while ignoring our true desires, we begin to live a switched off life. And it's important right now to understand there is a difference between a true desire and a hijacked one, and why that difference matters. So how then do we identify our true desires? I wrote a book about desire and discovered 6 foundational ways in which desire makes itself known to us. Eros, our natural desire for sex. Love, the yearning to be met deeply in love. Procreation, the call to create a family. Thriving, our tenacity to face our challenges. Rapture, the ache to know the divine, and contribution, the desire to create something of worth. Which of these have you said yes to? And more to the point, which one are you still ignoring? For a moment, think about something that really matters to you, the deeper desire. Imagine now dying and never expressing that. We can avoid this tragedy by reframing desire, putting it in its proper place as our personalized compass, because it actually matters which desire we choose to follow. As one leads down a path of living a switched off imitation version of our life, and the other creating a beautiful switched on symphony with our life. I'd like to end our time together today with 3 key steps to living a switched on life. Curiosity. We have to get curious. What lights you up? Get curious. Where's that enthusiasm? Start to look for it. Name it for yourself. Acceptance. If you discover you have a desire, say yes, even if all you can do is whisper, because our calling will often show up as a whisper. And when we accept it, we learn to trust it. Dare. We are all descendants of those who dared. And we must dare to discover our true desires and audaciously take a stand for them, especially if they're going against the grain. So if you're like my father, fighting to protect your loved ones, or like me, grappling to find the right path, remember this: we are all on a unique, emerging, and evolutionary journey led by one of our most profound and intimate forces of nature, our desire. Thank you.